The moment you put your life on display, you hand strangers the power to judge you, drag you down, and steal your momentum. People don't attack what they admire. They attack what they envy. So here's the truth nobody wants to admit. Your biggest enemy isn't your competition. It's the audience. There's a hidden weapon most people never discover. Disappearing, not running away, not hiding out, disappearing from the world long enough to rebuild yourself in secret. And when you finally reappear, the world won't recognize you, not because you changed your look, but because you changed your entire identity. Here's the uncomfortable truth most people never hear. The fastest way to lose power is to explain yourself. The moment you start talking about your plans, your struggles, your next move, you give away leverage. Not metaphorically, psychologically. Humans are wired to exchange information. It's tribal. It's ancient. In early survival, sharing information kept you alive. Today, it does the opposite. It makes you predictable. Predictability is weakness. If you want to disappear properly, the first thing that has to go is your mouth. Not permanently, not forever, but strategically. Silence is not passivity. Silence is positioning. Every time you talk about your life, your brain receives a reward. Dopamine, relief, validation. It feels productive, even when nothing has happened yet. This is why people love talking about goals more than achieving them. The brain can't tell the difference between progress and performance when an audience is involved. That's the trap. When you speak, your nervous system relaxes. When your nervous system relaxes, urgency dies. And when urgency dies, momentum collapses. This is why most people stall after announcing their plans. They already got the reward. Disappearing means removing that reward loop. You stop feeding people updates. You stop narrating your growth. You stop explaining what you're working on. Not because people are evil, but because attention changes behavior. When others know what you're doing, you unconsciously begin optimizing for their reaction instead of your outcome. You adjust timelines, you soften edges, you avoid failure publicly, and suddenly you're no longer moving forward. You're managing perception. That's not progress, that's performance. Chase Hughes talks often about status and control. Silence instantly shifts both. When you stop talking, people lean in. When you stop explaining, people speculate. When you stop revealing, you regain control of the frame. Silence creates asymmetry. You know more than they do. And in human interaction, the person with less information always has less power. Here's where it gets darker and more important. Most resistance you experience isn't direct sabotage. It's micro-interference. Small comments, doubt disguised as concern, just being realistic. Well, don't burn yourself out. These statements aren't malicious. They're protective of their identity. When you evolve, you threaten the mental hierarchy they've built. So their nervous system pushes back. They try to regulate you to protect themselves. If they don't know what you're doing, they can't interfere. That's the advantage of disappearing. To do this correctly, you must develop verbal discipline. Before you speak, ask, does this move me closer to my goal, or does this just make me feel seen? Most talking is emotional leakage. You must learn to catch thoughts before they exit your mouth. That's a skill. It takes practice. The urge to explain yourself is strong because explanation feels like control, but it's actually submission. When you explain, you're asking for permission to exist in the way you want. High-level operators don't explain. They execute. You don't owe clarity to anyone except the person you're becoming. This includes family, friends, coworkers, even people who mean well, especially them. Intent does not change impact. The fewer people who know your direction, the fewer variables can affect your movement. And something interesting happens when you go silent. Your energy consolidates. Instead of being dispersed through conversation, it turns inward. Focus sharpens, friction drops. You stop leaking motivation through words and start converting it into action. You also become harder to read. And when people can't read you, they can't manipulate you, project onto you, or emotionally pull you off course. This is not about arrogance. This is not about ego. This is about operational security. Think of your life like a mission. You wouldn't broadcast troop movements. You wouldn't announce strategy. You wouldn't reveal timelines. You'd move quietly, precisely, efficiently. Disappearing is not withdrawal from life. It's withdrawal from noise. And when you master silence, something powerful happens. You stop needing approval. You stop chasing reassurance. You stop outsourcing confidence. Your internal compass strengthens. You begin trusting yourself, not because someone clapped, but because you executed. That's when real transformation begins. Silence first, movement second, results last. Disappear like a ghost, not so the world can't see you, but so it can't stop you. Once you disappear, most people make the same mistake. They think silence alone is the work. It isn't. Silence is just the environment. The shadows are not where you hide. They're where you rebuild. And rebuilding requires something most people never develop: internal authority. When no one is watching, no one is judging, and no one is applauding, you are left with one question. Who are you when there is no audience? That question is where real transformation begins. In behavioral psychology, attention is a regulating force. When attention is present, behavior changes. This is why people behave differently on camera than off it. This is why performance collapses when the spotlight disappears. Most people don't know how to operate without external feedback. That's why the shadows break weak identities. When validation disappears, the nervous system panics, motivation drops, the brain starts bargaining. What's the point? No one will notice. I'll do it later. That internal resistance isn't laziness, it's identity withdrawal. Your old identity depended on being seen. When it's no longer fed, it fights back. This is where most people quit. Not because the work is hard, but because the reward structure is gone. To transform in silence, you must rebuild your reward system. You must stop tying satisfaction to visibility and start tying it to execution. This is the first psychological shift. You don't feel good because someone noticed. You feel good because you did what you said you would do. That may sound simple. It's not. It requires retraining the brain. Dopamine must be earned through effort, not applause. This is what Chase Hughes refers to when he talks about self-generated status. You become your own evaluator. You decide what counts as success. And once you do that, external validation loses its grip. Now let's talk about the work itself in the shadows. You don't aim for improvement. You aim for identity replacement. Improvement says, I'll add this habit. Replacement says, the old version no longer exists. That's a crucial difference. The brain resists change when it thinks it's temporary. It adapts when it believes the old rules are gone. This is why half measures fail. You can't negotiate with your former self. You have to outgrow it. Transformation in silence is ruthless, but clean. You simplify everything. You eliminate distractions, not because they're bad, but because they dilute focus. Every unnecessary decision drains cognitive energy. High performers remove friction by designing their environment to make discipline automatic. This is why environment beats motivation. You don't rely on willpower in the shadows. Willpower is fragile. You rely on structure. You time block your day. You assign purpose to hours. You remove options that don't serve the mission. The shadows are not chaotic. They're controlled. And here's where most people misunderstand pain. Pain in the shadows isn't something to avoid. It's a signal. When you feel resistance, discomfort, frustration, that's your nervous system recalibrating. You're stepping outside the identity it recognizes. The brain's job is to conserve energy and maintain familiarity. Growth violates both, so the brain pushes back. That pushback is not danger, it's recalibration. If you retreat at the first sign of discomfort, you teach your nervous system that resistance equals retreat. If you stay, you teach it that resistance equals adaptation. That's how capacity expands. This is why hiding your pain matters. When you vent, complain, or seek comfort, you discharge tension externally. Relief comes fast, but growth slows. Pain is pressure. Pressure creates structure. Release it too early, and the structure collapses. In the shadows, you metabolize pain internally. You don't dramatize it. You don't narrate it. You process it. This builds psychological weight, the kind that doesn't show, but is felt. Now something subtle happens as this process continues. You stop needing to prove anything, not because you've achieved everything, but because your sense of self no longer depends on reaction. You become calm under pressure, less reactive, harder to shake. This is identity solidification. The shadows forge this because there's no shortcut. No audience, no praise, no emotional safety net. Just repetition, consistency, and self-respect. And self-respect is built through one mechanism only. Keeping promises to yourself. Each time you do what you said you would do, especially when no one knows, you deposit credibility into your own nervous system. Confidence stops being something you feel and starts being something you are. This is why the shadow version of you is dangerous. Not loud, not flashy, not performative. Dangerous because it's stable. By the time you've spent enough time transforming in silence, something irreversible occurs. You no longer need the shadows. You can operate anywhere. But here's the paradox. Once you gain that ability, you prefer staying unseen because visibility feels inefficient. And that's when you know the transformation worked. You didn't become better for the world. You became sovereign for yourself. The shadows didn't hide you. They rebuilt you. Most people misunderstand transformation. They think it's about adding habits, better routines, more discipline. That's not transformation, that's decoration. Real change happens at the identity level, and identity is not motivational, it's neurological. The brain doesn't ask, what do you want? It asks, who are you? And it organizes behavior around that answer. If your identity is someone trying, your behavior will reflect effort without consistency. If your identity is someone becoming, you will oscillate. If your identity is someone who is, the behavior becomes automatic. This is why most people relapse. They change actions without changing identity. In the shadows, you don't upgrade your old self. You replace it. Chase Hughes often emphasizes that humans operate off self-concept loops. Your nervous system is constantly scanning for evidence that confirms who you believe you are. When behavior contradicts identity, the brain creates discomfort. It resolves that discomfort by pulling behavior back into alignment. That's why change feels hard. You're fighting your own internal narrative. To build a new self, you must deliberately engineer evidence. Not affirmations, not hype, evidence. Identity is built through repeated, observable behavior under stress. The brain only accepts a new identity when it sees proof that survives resistance. This is why the shadows are essential. No audience means no performance. No applause means no shortcuts. Only truth. You start by defining the identity with precision, not vague traits like confident or successful. Those are outcomes, not identities. You define standards. How does this person wake up? How do they respond to pressure? What do they tolerate? And what do they eliminate? Identity is a rule set. Once defined, you act as if the decision is permanent. Temporary behavior never rewires the brain. Permanence does. The nervous system adapts to what it believes is non-negotiable. This is why half commitments fail. When the brain thinks, we can quit later, it never fully reorganizes. When it thinks, this is the new baseline, it adapts quickly. That's identity engineering. Now let's address fear because it will appear here. When you start replacing your identity, your old self will panic, not emotionally, biologically. Familiar patterns feel safe to the brain, even if they're destructive. The unknown feels dangerous, even if it's beneficial. So your brain will send signals, doubt, fatigue, second-guessing, urges to return to old habits. This is not weakness. This is neurological friction. If you interpret it correctly, it becomes a green light. Discomfort here means rewiring is happening. The key is not to negotiate. Negotiation tells the brain the old identity still has authority. You don't argue with cravings. You don't debate resistance. You execute standards. This is why discipline isn't emotional. It's procedural. Procedures bypass mood. In the shadows, you repeat the behaviors until they no longer require effort. At that point, identity has shifted. The action feels normal. That's when the change becomes irreversible. Now here's the part most people never understand. Once identity changes, motivation becomes irrelevant. You don't motivate yourself to act in alignment with who you are. You only need motivation when behavior and identity conflict. This is why elite performers appear calm, consistent, even detached. They're not pushing themselves, they're expressing themselves. And this is why showing progress too early is dangerous. External validation can freeze identity formation. The brain starts associating the new behavior with praise instead of self-alignment. When praise disappears, behavior collapses. That's why progress must stay hidden until identity stabilizes. Once stabilized, it can't be taken away. You are no longer trying to be disciplined. You are disciplined. You are no longer working on confidence. You are decisive. You are no longer building resilience. You are unshakable. This is not mindset. This is conditioning. The shadows accelerate this process because there's no external feedback to distort it. Only execution, only consistency, only internal authority. And eventually, something profound happens. You stop thinking about becoming someone. You simply are. The old identity doesn't die loudly. It fades quietly, starved of reinforcement. And when the new identity locks in, you don't feel proud. You feel calm. That calm is power. Not the kind that demands attention, the kind that doesn't need it. Most people don't fail during transformation. They fail after it. They rebuild themselves in silence, then give all the power back the moment they re-enter the room. Reappearing is not a celebration. It's a strategic moment. Handled incorrectly, it collapses everything you built. Handled correctly, it cements your new identity permanently. Here's the first principle you need to understand. Visibility is a force multiplier, but only after leverage exists. Before leverage, visibility weakens you. After leverage, visibility amplifies you. Most people reappear emotionally. They want acknowledgement, recognition, closure. They want others to see the struggle. That urge is natural and dangerous because the moment you seek validation, you signal that the old hierarchy still matters. Chase Hughes teaches that humans are constantly scanning for status cues. When you re-enter a social system, people unconsciously test you to see if you've changed or if you're just performing confidence. They test through questions, through jokes, through subtle challenges. If you explain yourself, defend your choices, or overshare, you fail the test. Power is not claimed. It's assumed. The correct reappearance is calm, minimal, and uneventful. No announcements, no explanations, no dramatic reveal. Your presence should answer questions before they're asked. This is because identity is communicated non-verbally first. Tone, pace, boundaries, decision speed, emotional regulation. These signals tell people whether the change is real. If your nervous system is stable, people adjust automatically. If it isn't, they probe harder. That's why the work in the shadows must be complete before you return. Partial transformations invite negotiation. Complete ones shut it down. Now let's talk about the biggest mistake people make: overexposure. Once people notice you've changed, attention returns. Compliments, curiosity, interest. That attention feels good, but it's a trap. Too much visibility too fast reactivates old behavioral loops. You start managing perception again. You start explaining choices. You start softening boundaries. This is how people regress without realizing it. The rule is simple. Reappear, but don't re-engage. You don't isolate, but you don't reinsert yourself emotionally into old dynamics either. You participate selectively. You respond, not react. You speak when necessary, not reflexively. Silence still protects you even after transformation. Here's where this gets deeper. Once your identity has shifted, your tolerance for dysfunction drops. Old environments that once felt normal will now feel noisy, inefficient, even irritating. That's not arrogance, it's recalibration. But if you ignore this signal and force yourself to fit back in, your nervous system will adapt downward. You don't rise to environments, you adapt to them. So part of reappearing is environmental curation. You don't need to cut everyone off, but you do need to control access. Who gets your time? Who gets your energy? Who gets influence? This is not about superiority. It's about sustainability. Chase Hughes often points out that people lose power not because they lack strength, but because they leak it. They give it away through emotional overavailability, poor boundaries, and unnecessary explanations. Reappearing correctly means sealing those leaks. Another critical principle: never narrate your transformation. Let others draw conclusions. Narration invites debate. Debate invites hierarchy negotiation. You don't want either. When asked what changed, the correct answer is neutral and short. I adjusted some things. I got clearer. I focused. Nothing more. The less you say, the more solid the change feels. Now, here's the paradox most people don't expect. If the transformation worked, you won't feel the need to reappear at all. You'll realize that visibility was never the goal. Control was. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to reclaim status. You don't need closure. You move differently now. Decisions are faster. Emotions are quieter. Boundaries are firmer, and people feel it. This is the final marker of real change. You stop trying to be respected and become undeniable, not through force, not through dominance, but through consistency and self-trust. You don't announce standards. You enforce them through behavior. You don't explain absences. You return when it suits you. And if you ever choose to disappear again, you do it without drama, because disappearing was never about escape. It was about sovereignty. And once you have that, you don't lose it when you reappear. You carry it with you quietly, firmly, unshakably. If you've ever noticed how quickly people turn on you the moment you start rising, you already know the truth. Visibility is a liability. The more you open your life for display, the more people will find a way to drag you down. It's a natural social phenomenon. People don't like others becoming stronger than them. They don't even realize they're doing it, but it happens. That's why there's something powerful about disappearing, not hiding, not quitting, but going silent, working in the shadows, becoming unavailable, committing to your transformation in secret. It's a strange feeling, almost exhilarating, because you know that when you reappear, your change will shock the world. But here's the twist. When you finally do reappear, you won't care, because the shadows teach you something that the spotlight never can. The only opinion that matters is yours. Now, let's break down the process into 3 parts. 1, how to disappear. 2, what to do in the shadows. 3, how to reappear. And if you mess up any part of this, especially the last, you'll regret it. Here's the reality. Most people refuse to accept you don't need more motivation, you need more privacy. Stop begging the world to notice you. Stop asking for permission. Stop broadcasting your dreams. Disappear, build, transform, emerge. And when you return, don't just shock the world. Make it impossible for them to ignore you.